Welcome to How's Your ePresence? This is Mark Galvin, and I am the founder and president of ePresence. We are a social media firm, and you are joining us for our live broadcast of How's Your ePresence. This is the show where we talk about business and social media, and we do appreciate that you are here. So on How's Your ePresence, we have a new format. We are producing content that is really a library of content that folks can come back to again and again and again. We may veer a little bit off of that channel today, but we're still focused on that. What do we do on How's Your ePresence? We're always trying to produce content to help people understand how to do their digital marketing a little better. Our last show, for example, was a conversation on how you can launch a new podcast, make some money on it. How do you monetize that? Had a great guest from what was Megaphone FM with Jeremy Weiner. We found out today Megaphone FM, our guest from last show, has been bought by Spotify. So now they're part of Spotify. So we'll probably have to have him come back and talk with us a little bit more. So in the future, when you want to come back to our show, we would love for you to subscribe. And so you'll see, let's see, which way is it? I think it's this side. So hit that subscribe button. There we go. Hit that subscribe button down there so you get a notification of when we go live. Here's why. We want you to jump in with your comments. We want you to jump in here and tell us, hey, this is what you think about our content. This is what you think about what we're talking about. And you can join the conversation by posting those. And today, you're going to want to tune in because we do have something that you're going to want to weigh in on, that you're going to want to share your opinion on. So with that said, I did mention this, maybe I didn't mention it. We're going to talk about the intersection of social media and politics. And to have this conversation, I want to bring to the stage Eric Welch, who is our director of social media. Eric, are you out there?
Hey, Mark, I'm here.
There he is.
How are you?
Hey, buddy. Thanks for joining us on this for this chat. You know, we don't typically like to talk about politics on any of our channels, especially here on How's Your ePresence. But it really is one of those things it's kind of on our mind right now, right? There's a few things happening.
Yeah, it's been a pretty I think regardless of what side you're on, it's been a pretty stressful 7 to 10 days.
I think that's a good way of putting it. If you like to watch politics and you really are pulling for someone, this was no matter what, no matter how you see it, it's been stressful. So in the middle of all this, there's something that's been happening a lot, and we've seen we've heard about the Russians, we've heard about the Iranians, maybe North Korea getting involved in our political in the political landscape, trying to influence us, maybe trying to fragment us. And what we wanted today is have a conversation about that, because I have an idea. And Eric and I were chewing this up, and we decided to throw this on the live channel. And so here's the idea. I'm proposing, are you ready for this? I'm proposing that we get all social media, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, although LinkedIn doesn't seem to get in the middle of this as much. All the major social media accounts, Snapchat, not that Snapchat is really one that really jumps in the middle of this, but let's have all those social media platforms block everything that has to do with politics 6 months before an election. So 6 months before election, if you're typing on your Facebook page and you say some keywords, Facebook will shut you down. They'll allow you to post it, but you're not going to be able to share it. Nobody else will be able to like it or comment on it. And the mission is here. This is a great way to shut off all the other people that are out there. The Russians can't make a comment that'll start to divide us. There will be the vitriol that you see on social media when it comes to politics will disappear, because you won't be able to get into those conversations. This could be a great way to help us pivot back to really trying to find a way that we can focus on politics in a way that's more beneficial to us versus being really trying to upset each other. The question is some of things will have to be carved out. So, for example, I would say that the candidate and the candidate's campaign can have their own social media feeds where they do share content. but there's no comments on it. You can't share it, you can't push it, but they could go ahead and push their content out there. And this is each campaign for, all the levels from local governments all the way up to the presidential election. Eric, what do you think about that?
Well, it's an interesting idea, and I have a few questions for you. The first one that comes to mind is, and you did just mention it, this would be for all levels of elections. So from the local up to the state up to national. The biggest question I have is there's elections going on throughout the year. Obviously,
right.
Every 4 years, there's the big one for the president. But every 6 years, you have Senate elections. You have, we're going to have in Georgia, we're going to have a runoff in January.
Oh my. Boy, is that going to be nuts.
2 runoffs. It's
already nuts.
We're going to have 2 runoffs for that. That's in January. But then also on the local level, there can be elections. Sometimes they pop up when you're not expecting them because if you're not that tuned in. So how would you, under that potential rule, how would you factor in elections going year round?
Yeah, when you look at rolling out something like this, it would make more sense to do a pilot on it before the presidential election comes to play. So I would say in 2 years, it would make sense to try it in the midterm elections where you got. I don't think are senators voted into office in midterms. I can't remember. It's every 6 years.
Yeah.
Probably happens.
There were some that happened this last week, and then some will happen again in 2 weeks. It's kind of staggered.
Yeah. So, but I think midterms would be the first place you could try it, and maybe you do it for 3 months and test it to see how it works. Because I'll tell you this: one of the things about any idea is when you first roll it out, something's going to get screwed up. Something's going to not work correctly. There's going to be a problem. So let's do this. Let's watch it and see what works and what doesn't. And if something is not working, then you're going to modify it. But I do think that you do it for any election. And if it's manageable from the local level, do it for the local level. Yeah.
I think the other problem I have with it is, you mentioned whoever the candidates are, plus their affiliation or their campaign would allow to be allowed to post stuff. However, that doesn't stop them from putting out misinformation, which is a problem we're currently in, where one of the former candidates, I don't know what you call them. The president has put out a lot of stuff that's getting hit with misinformation across the board on all platforms. So I don't know how that would stop that from happening.
Here's and honestly, locally, we saw some of the local elections saying things that were incorrect also. And that was, and I noticed that from the Democratic candidates. So I do think that there's a fact check piece that was happening before social media, right? There was a fact check piece where people were local news and other folks were doing the fact checks on the items that were showing up in local advertising. And I think that would continue and that would be good. I don't think that there should be, I would think that it's better for the social media systems to stay out of that, to not try to say this is false and this is true. If you narrow everything down and nobody can share it, it's less damaging, right? So let's take for example, if a candidate wants to say that the world's going to end this week, people can't share that and make it larger than it is. But you could have the fact checkers like we've always had for local advertising, for any advertising, to come in and say, that's not true. I think that that's the way to handle it because it gets the social media count. And I would say this is my problem. The social media services, the platforms, they are jumping in and trying to tell us what's true and what's not. And they can have a bias. It gets them out of the bias business.
Yeah, I see how that, I don't know. I still think it's a little troublesome when, regardless of what side you're on, you can still put out whatever you want. You still got to have the fact checkers, and those, depending on the candidate, they could have up to millions and millions of followers. So the misinformation could still get out to a lot of people.
Right.
One other offshoot of this, and this came to me as I was researching for today's conversation, was the growth of new social media platforms. And I don't know are you familiar with Parler?
I have heard of Parler. Is that the one that's very conservative?
Yeah, and I don't know if it was started with that intended, but a lot of folks are, because of Facebook and Twitter and being either posts being removed or censored, or warning being tacked on it. There are a lot of conservatives, quite frankly, that are moving to Parler, and there have been some prominent people within the conservative movement that are encouraging their followers to abandon Facebook, abandon Twitter, and come join us over at Parler, where the restrictions at this point are a little more loose. So
sure.
So, like I said, I don't know if Parler's founders, if this is what they intended, but this is where they are. And I think my point with this is the people are going to find ways around it, which I think is why Twitter and Facebook have had such a hard time, and they are trying to block or censor, or however you want to frame it. They're
Right.
trying to moderate the information that's out there to some extent, but there's hundreds of millions of people on social media, and they're looking for ways, any which way, to get around it. And it's kind of a race between the giants, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, whoever, trying to stay ahead of the really smart people who are coming up with new ways to do things.
Exactly. And this reminds me of an is a very old quote that came from the Bible, and it was something that Pilate said to Jesus, and the quote is, "What is truth?" And I love that phrase, because the question is, what is truth? And here's what worries me is when you start becoming the arbiter of truth, there's always another side to it. There's always another version of that truth where people can believe it. And I will tell you that it is difficult to be in that space, because if you're trying to figure out what is true and what's not, you're going to have to produce a lot of content. And then when you start producing content from a group that could be biased in of themselves, and that's your proof, then that's a problem. So that's why I think just shutting it down, letting the candidates say what they want, and you could say, I mean, all of them, all the accounts, you could put a banner on every single one of them that says, we at Facebook do not check the validity of any of the content on this page. It's fine, right? You do it on Twitter too. You do it on the homepage. We are not checking the validity of any of the content on this page. Proceed at your own risk, right? I think that would be the way to handle it. Now, you mentioned Parler. Here's my feeling about Parler is that you would have to look at social media and figure out where that line of demarcation is. If you've got X number of members, then you fall into this realm. If it is an overtly conservative space, it's sort of like, I look at it like football. So in the state of Georgia, we have the University of Georgia, and we also have Georgia Tech. Well, Georgia Tech has a forum where everybody talks about football in Georgia Tech, and they really, really hate Georgia. And the Georgia fans have their own forum, and they really, really hate Georgia Tech. Actually, they really hate Florida right now, but we'll stay focused on Tech.
Yeah.
So, if you go to that space, that in that space, it is going to be negative if you're not a member of that particular group. So what worries me is that you end up with, if you're on Facebook, we are finding ourselves being divided. And I will tell you, the larger goal here is to find a way that we can have more unifying tones. And I see a lot of fistfights on Facebook, literally and figuratively, where people are getting in fights over over what is going on or what somebody's talking about when it comes to politics. And I'm not picking a side. I'm not going to say one side's right and one side's wrong. But all I see is that there's nothing healthy in that conversation. Because I will tell you, I'm not going to convince a person to change their position on Facebook. What I am going to do is I'll probably make them angry. It's one of the things that we say at ePresence. We don't talk about politics, sex, or religion because you're going to alienate part of your audience once you do that. So I would say, okay, here's the size of social media, whatever that number is. Maybe it is in the hundreds of millions. Don't know. Like LinkedIn has 700 million members. That's probably the smallest of all the major social media systems. So maybe it's 500 million users, and you say, okay, if you're in this space, then that's when you do it. Now the question here, my question to myself is, who's going to enforce this? Does this become a government thing? I would say that I think that the social media platforms should create their own coalition, their own association, their own society, whatever you want to call that, where they go into and they agree to self-manage, but they have a governing board that comes up with these rulings so that it's not necessarily the government, but it's an independent board that they're beholden to. I think that's the way to manage it.
Yeah, I think it's possible. I can't help but think that no matter what structure you come up with, they're gonna figure out a way around it. And it could be you're shutting down our freedom of speech could be an argument by blocking that. That's gonna come up. There's a lot of ways around it, or they're gonna try to figure out a way around it.
Can we talk about freedom of speech? You okay if I jump in there?
Yeah, go for it.
So my screen just blinked on me. So if I look frozen, am I back?
You're there. You're there. You're
okay, good. Freedom of speech. The challenge is if you don't do something across the board consistently, then it's a freedom of speech issue. And that's why I like this as a solution. So this isn't I'm not limiting a specific person's speech. I'm limiting all conversation on this. And so if you want to have free speech, that's fine. But I'm not going to be Facebook. I'm not going to tell you, Eric Welch, you can't talk about this, or you're not telling the truth. Instead, I'm going to say all people are no longer able to have this conversation on on the platforms. And that's one of the things. That's why the coalition of social media accounts makes more sense, because they can all agree or disagree to join in on this. Is it the right? Is it the number one answer? No, but I will tell you this. I think it is a brilliant way to solve two things. We are now not allowing someone to lie on social media and it's shared everywhere, right? It's going to have to be through conversation, which, okay, fine. That's better. And we're not going to allow people to get on our social media platforms and fight. And it keeps the Russians out, and it keeps the Iranians out of our system. And I will tell you, and the Chinese, that's my biggest worry. The larger issue here is that we've got people outside our country trying to ruin us and divide us, and it's working. This would be a great way to stop that.
Yep. Yeah, you might be onto something. We'll see. I think.
Well, I don't think they're going to do it, right? Because you think about the money that they're walking away from. That's a problem. Right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, there's so many factors to the whole thing. One other point I wanted to bring up, or I guess something else I found in my research that I thought was interesting, is different ways that the titans, Facebook and Twitter, are trying to combat. And we mentioned Facebook. They've been labeling things as, I took a quick look at Trump's Facebook page, and just about it mirrors his Twitter feed. It's the same stuff, right. But everything on there has a Reuters report that Joe Biden is the president-elect. So they slap that on every single one of his posts. But with something Twitter has done, and I don't know how active you are on Twitter, but they have you used to be able to just kind of scroll through your feed and you could hit retweet, and without anything then it would show up on your feed. But now they have removed that, where you can retweet, but a thing pops up where you got to add your comment to it, quote tweet. There's a way around it, but the point is, it's adding a step so that this comes up and you got to think for a second, is this something I want to do? Because before, without hesitation, without thinking, without anything, you could just hit the retweet button and you keep moving. They've also added on articles that they have determined are questionable or might not be true. A pop-up will come up basically saying, are you sure you want to do this? Do you want to share this? Have you read this? I don't know the exact wording, but they're trying to slow the spread of misinformation by adding a couple of extra steps that the user, it forces them to think about it a little bit. Where before you could hit retweet without knowing anything. It could be a headline that you like, and then you retweet it, but someone then opens that up and they read it, and the headline was, clickbait, and the actual story is something completely different.
Right.
That's not a good look for you or for your brand or whatever the case may be.
Absolutely. I'd seen those items showing up on Twitter, especially. I do a lot of Twitter management for a local sports team, and I've noticed how those things are popping up. Well, here's what's fascinating to me, and really flies in. This is going to really upset some people, I think, and that is that I've seen the things that Twitter have said where they said this is not true information, and they're sending folks to. The proof is you click the button and you go to another page, and on that other page it'll show all the different places that they're saying that this content is not true. And I'm specifically thinking about the president. And what I see there is they're citing all the sources that the president has already said is fake news. It is not going to that content's not going to make his audience go, oh, wow, that's not true. It's just going to reinforce his audience. Like, look, the fake news media. And that's the problem. And I'm not going to tell you that what the president was posting was true. What worries me is that you don't have, number one, we do have media that is biased, that uses biased language when they speak about certain politicians, especially with the president. I mean, there was no doubt in my mind that CNN and the Washington Post, as an example, they hated President Trump, hated him. And then the flip side is Fox News, for the most part, loved him, right? And so you've got two very biased sources that I think if you point to those, or three in this case, right? If you point to them as proof, that's a problem, because we don't have a really unbiased source of news. I think I'd argue that the Wall Street Journal is probably somewhat there, but it's hard to find one that, they're absolutely going to be unbiased. And I think because as people, we're just biased people in general. So how do you fix that? It's so hard to do. Let's just limit folks from sharing content. I think that you say, okay, Mr. Candidate, Mr. or Mrs. Candidate, we're going to let you share whatever you want. And we're going to say, we're not going to fact check this. So proceed at your own risk. I don't know. Maybe it's a solution. My number one issue is let's find a way to stop poking each other in the eye.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know we don't know how to fix that. And I think
it's hard.
Yeah, between the foreign interference and the division domestically, I don't know how that gets fixed. I think it's going to take a long time. Right. And I think there's a lot of good that happens on social media, and there's a lot of Twitter is my go-to for just getting the news of what's going on, and I love doing that. And social media can be used for so much good things that
what we got to do. We should do a show on Twitter. We have so many clients that come to me and say, "Tell me about Twitter. What does it do? Why should I be on Twitter?" I had a client hit me this week, and he said, I'm leaving all social media. I'm going to stay on LinkedIn. Should I stay on Twitter? And I told him, I said, well, wow, Twitter's where you get publications retweeting your content.
Yeah.
So you need to be there. That's where all the journalists are.
Yeah, it's true. And throughout this whole conversation, we've kind of lumped Twitter and Facebook together as we go along, but they are so incredibly different. And
oh my gosh, that's very true.
they can, but that said, a brand can use them for in a positive way. Just you can't. What I always call it blanket posting, where you take the exact same thing and you throw it across all the channels. You can't do that.
It's not a good idea.
But then we're getting into strategy, and that's a whole nother show.
And we do that. We do that for
right.
some of our clients. We help them, and there goes my screen again. I am. I've just been in the middle of technology challenges all week long, but I'm back now. So we got to wrap. We're at 26 minutes, so let's wrap this up. But I do think for folks, if you're watching this and you're watching it after we're finished, share your comments. We'll interact with you. We think that we need to come up with a solution. If not this one, something. Let's stop fighting on social media, because listen, if I run into somebody who has a different political opinion than me and I'm talking to them face to face, I'm not going to get in an argument with them. I'm going to have a logical conversation. But if I get on my Facebook stream, I may bring out the knives, right? We've got a major problem here, and it is affecting us culturally. We got to figure out a solution. If not this, something. So love to hear your thoughts if you have a solution. Eric, any final thoughts?
No, I think we're good. I think if we focus on the positivity that's out there on social media and the good that you can get either for growing your brand, growing your business, just connecting with people. You'd be surprised at who you can interact with. You might think, well, so-and-so, they live across the country and they have hundreds of thousands of followers and I'll just read their stuff. Well, reach out to those people, because you never know. They might if you make a good point, they might hit you back, and you could have a new Twitter friend.
We have found people and developed relationships with people on LinkedIn. Have it in this organization. LinkedIn is a good space to live, but you can do this on all platforms. But there needs to be a sense of trust, and once you have that, then you can get things done. Well, Eric, I think I'll wrap up and talk a little bit about the webinars coming up. What do you think?
Yeah, it sounds good. I'll get out of here.
All right. So here's again. Thanks. Hey, Eric, thanks for being here. It's always a pleasure to chat with you. He and I talk all the time. We're always solving world crises. We just figured we'd do it online with you guys today. Reminder, we have a webinar that we're running every month. So once you figure out that you need some help on your social media, come join us. You can go right there to that link on the screen, e-pr.me/discount. Take advantage of our podcast discount of $37.50. Click there. You can sign up for one of our 2 LinkedIn webinars. The first one, we talk about profiles. The second one, we really drill into more of the security settings and how to post. What do we do at ePresence? We're a full-service social media agency. So we kind of have 4 lanes. We help individuals. We help companies. We help college athletes or college students in general, and athletes for that matter, if they're in college, as well as any type of consulting and such. So give us a ping if you'd like some help on your digital social media. We'd love to have a chance to help you out there. And then follow us. Just a reminder, please click that subscribe button. When you subscribe, you'll get a notification that we're live. You can jump on and you can send us a message and say, hey, here's my thought. I would like to know what you think about this idea. And we'll talk about that. So please do that. And we hope to see all of you here on all of our social media very soon. Well, that's a wrap for this week's version of How's Your ePresence. Hopefully we'll see all of you soon. On behalf of Eric Welch, who's normally our producer today, one of the main events, as well as our director. He's our producer, director, and all-around great guy. Eric, thanks for being here. I'm Mark Galvin. Hope to see you again soon here on How's Your ePresence.